everyone, my name's Hannah and you're listening to the Brunel Let's Talk About It Mental Health and Wellbeing podcast. I'm always so happy when I say that in one sentence because it's quite a big one. So today's episode's quite interesting. It's different from all the other ones. Most of our episodes, for the ones who are frequent listeners, they'll know that we cover quite crucial and important topics. This is also an important topic, but it's more lighthearted. It's about graduation. And I've got a very special guest today. Do you mind introducing yourself for the listeners?
Sure, absolutely. I'm Andrew Jones. I'm the Vice-Chancellor and indeed the President of Brunel University, London.
Yeah, so thank you so much for being on our podcast today. First of all, I'd just like to say that I think one of the things I'll miss about Brunel is how much community-driven it is. It's a very community-driven place. And I think having people like you and all the other guests who have been on, it sort of shows that there's, we've got all this staff who are more than happy to talk to students and for staff. So thank you very much for being on here today. But yeah, it's more of a Q&A today. I'll be asking a couple questions. And yeah, so obviously for the listeners who are graduating this year, you'll know that it'll be, by the time we have this episode out, it'll be about in a few weeks time or about a month. It depends on when we have it out, but it will be soon. And so, yes, we know that it'll be in July. We all know that also life after graduation could be quite overwhelming. It could be quite intimidating. You might not know what you want to do. So what would you say to students who feel overwhelmed after graduating? What would you say, what's the best way to approach that feeling and to deal with that?
There's quite a lot to say. I mean, the first thing to say is that I think that's quite a normal experience. And I mean, university is a very wonderful time. Graduation is a very important moment, and it's quite natural actually to have that moment of reflection, and some people can feel overwhelmed. My first and most important piece of advice is to not rush into things and to take a little bit of time and look after yourself and think about what you want to do, and not worry if you don't immediately have the answer to that question. I think many students, and this reflects experience over many years, aren't necessarily sure. We often have people at graduation where we're providing honorary doctorates who are people at the later stage of their careers who've been tremendously successful. And one of the things that always strikes me is what they all say in their speeches, and hopefully we'll hear some of those speeches at this graduation, is people talk about careers as things that are slightly serendipitous and that people don't necessarily have a plan for what they want to do from the age of 21, or from the age of 18, or from the age of 25. So you have to go with the flow a little bit. Yeah. That obviously does involve choices, but you don't have to be at your graduation ceremony thinking, right, I know exactly what I want to do, and therefore I'm going to go and do this, and then in 3 years I'll have done this. That said, people obviously have some sense. I think sometimes they may be further study, or they may be interested in more work experience, or they may simply want to take some time out actually to reflect and do some other things in life, you know, the post-graduation gap experience, so to speak. So lots of things you can do. Yeah,
I mean, I think I can sort of relate to that because before I started my undergraduate, so I'm 24, I should have been done 3 years ago technically, but I took like 2 gap years, and I think that was exactly what I needed, is that time to think. And also now I'm so much more like devoted to my studies, and I take it a lot more seriously than I think I would have done in the beginning when I didn't know what I wanted to do. So I think, it's okay for students to feel like they might not know what they're doing, because maybe that's exactly what you do need to feel in that moment for you to sort of find out what you do want to do. Maybe you need that time to sort of reflect and have that. So, it's okay if they don't know exactly what they want to do straight away. So my next question to you would be, is there anything you wish you had known when you were studying that you wish someone had told you earlier?
Yeah, I think that's a very good question. I think the first part of that answer is the thing we've just been talking about. I think often when people are studying, there's a sense of needing to be able to give an answer to the question of what you want to do. And I guess, life is like that from when you're at school through study. People constantly ask you that. And I mean, if you're taking a law degree or a medical degree, then maybe you have more of an answer. So I think to be relaxed about and confident in the fact that you don't necessarily have to have a clear answer, as we've just said. I think also then it is to not to be afraid to experiment or think differently about what you might want to do in future against previous expectations. So I've encountered many students who finished a period of study, they've got a degree, they've enjoyed that degree, and the experience of studying for that degree as well, they enjoyed that. That's not what they want to do. And they need to therefore then, think about something different. That is still the learning of what you want to do in life. Right? And it doesn't mean what you've just done in your period of study or what degree is invalid in some way. It's part of the building block of what you're going to do next. So now that's easy. I'd have that as the thing I'd say that you would want to know earlier, because it's easy for me to say that now, but I think that is something that if people who are aged 19, 20, 21 had that confidence and knew that, it would be quite helpful, and so it would have been in my life. I think a lot of people have a sense of, I need to be able to answer the question, and that's not necessarily a problem if you can't answer the question at this stage.
I think also about talking about experience, I think every experience is valuable. So like today I was shadowing the person who edited our podcast, Valentine, and I wanted to know more about what he does, because even though it has nothing to do with my degree, I still am interested, and I still think learning from his experiences, you can learn from anyone and anything, and all of it is very valid and very valuable. So for future students, because we also have prospective students who might be listening to this podcast, what would you say to students who are considering attending Brunel?
Yes, well, obviously, as you might expect, there's a great deal I can say. But one of the things I often say and do to all kind of prospective students and their families and those interested in the university is that Brunel is really quite a distinct university in the UK. And I mean, lots of people might say that of other institutions, but we have a very particular history and we occupy a very distinct place in the system, so to speak. You referred when you started about a strong sense of community. I mean, we're effectively the only London university that has this wonderful campus with over 5,000 people living on it. But perhaps equally or more important is that is a tremendous community of people from across the world. Our position in London, and we're very close to Heathrow, one of the world's most directly connected airports, means there are people from 130 plus countries living on the campus, and I think that's quite important in a distinctive sense. You don't get that experience necessarily. You get international mixed community in London, but people get I'm always struck when I talk to our alumni or students who are graduating about what a unique kind of experience, the friends they've met, the people they've met, the experiences they've had from people from all over the world. And the other thing then is Brunel's history as an institution that faces the real world, that is about employment and industry and careers, and that's very much at the core of what we do in our degrees. And of course, other universities have that, but I think it's always been very, very much at the centre of the Brunel experience, combined with that global city, international community experience. So we're pretty distinct, I think, in the world of universities. And if you're interested in that, then definitely do take a look at us.
Yeah. I mean, it's one of the things I think I'll miss most about Brunel is just how diverse it is and how accepting it is whilst being so diverse. I think that's a really big thing. And I was saying previously to Mike and Rona that it's one of the things that I felt like I was very safe here, and I've always felt very accepted, and I think that's a beautiful thing to feel. Feeling safe in a place where you're going to be there quite often. So, definitely need. If there are students who are considering Brunel, definitely would say there is something here that I feel like it's quite rare, and it's very very and a beautiful place to study. So. Moving on to what options students can look into after graduation, what advice do you have for students as they look for future careers or future programs to apply to? What would you say?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of discussion at the moment, and as you might imagine, we are very engaged in discussions about the future of work and the nature of careers and jobs, and universities are thinking about this a lot, and here we're even more so. I think some of that can feel quite daunting. I mean, you will read things in the media about how all these jobs are going to be taken away by artificial intelligence, which I don't think is the case, by the way, in quite the way that some of the slightly more alarmist stories come across. So the first things are take your time and don't be, as I said before, don't be afraid to think carefully and maybe even experiment or gain a bit of experience. but also to then think about what excites you in terms of what you might want to do for employment or as a job, and what you're interested in. Sometimes people feel they should move in a certain career path because that's what's expected, or it's a good job to have, or it's a good career to pursue. But what you really need to do is what probably your parents will also tell you to do, which is do what you want to do and what excites you and what you're going to wake up on a Monday morning and think, oh, that's what I'm doing. Yeah. And that might take a little bit of finding. So, I mean, here we obviously have a great deal of support. As I say, at the graduation ceremonies, when Brunel graduands become graduates, we continue to provide very extensive career support and advice for quite a long period, several years after you graduate, which enables people, I think, to take a bit more time, think about what they want. If it's about further study, and one of the things I think is to think about the role of, if you've done an undergraduate degree, master's degrees are more specialised. Some of them are more vocational, some of them are more focused on the needs of certain industries. The university here has just started, as you might imagine, for more engineering-minded people, a master's degree in hydrogen, which is clearly going to be a major industry in the future. Yeah. So take your time to think about those specialisms. That said, they're not super specific. People always think, well, if I do a degree in this or I do a master's degree in this, then for the next 40 years, that's what I'm going to be. And that's not how it works. And that's not, even in the conversations about AI, that's not how it's going to work either. It's a more specialised training, but it enables you to make the next step. And maybe it's enabling for the next few steps in your career. But careers are a learning journey, so it's not locking you in, if you like, into some destiny for the next 25 years.
I mean, I had a colleague of mine who did music, and she switched to psychology, and she was like, oh, I don't know if I should do it. I was like, just go for it. Like, it doesn't matter if you've done that before and you want to do something different now. I think that's life, different experiences, different things you want to do, whatever feels right in that moment, just go for it. There's literally no harm. It sounds as simple as that. It's like, just go for it. There's a lot more pros than the cons where you're thinking, oh, but this is not what I was supposed to do. What is this supposed to do?
Exactly. I think that's very right. People understandably, they feel the pressures of expectation from all kinds of quarters, whether that's people they've met at school, whether it's family, whether it's somebody they met, in other walks of life saying they should do this. So you've got to focus. And this, again, is what honorary doctorate speeches are often said from people later in their careers. You've got to pursue what you want to do and then think about further study or work, the next work step as the enabler for that.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a pressure that some students feel when they feel like they have, especially I think in my culture, mental health isn't taken as seriously as it should be. And I know that when I first said that I wanted to go down like the psychological route, they're like, oh, but do you want to do the real doctor? They don't consider it a real doctor. And I was like, I'm going to change that. I'll be the person who changes that perspective, that idea of it not being a real thing. And yeah, it's about what feels right for you, and that felt right for me, and that's why I'm so passionate about it, and it's what I want to continue on doing. But
yes, absolutely.
Yeah. So what are some of the options that students can look into in terms of applying here? So I know that we do a lot of different masters and stuff like that, but we do quite a few different courses. What kind of stuff can students look into after graduating in terms of Brunel?
Yes, I mean, from undergraduate degrees, as I mentioned, I mean, being a sort of technically minded, technological university, but by technical, I don't just mean in science subjects. That applies equally to our creative arts subjects. They're technical in the sense of things that lead you towards career paths. We have a very substantial portfolio of masters, of postgraduate study options, probably more than a lot of institutions. From back to the 1960s when Brunel was established as a university, although it's got a longer history than that, it's always been about providing those kinds of postgraduate courses that enable people that face what employers need and what the economy needs and what society needs. Yeah. So depending on your subject area, there are a wide range of choices we keep. And I mean, I feel sort of leading the university that the university should be bringing online new programs that are addressing the skills and the sort of knowledge that people need to go into the job market at any one point in time. So we've got a whole set of new, I mentioned one, but I mean, despite mentioning artificial intelligence as something that's a threat, I think we've got about 3 or 4 programs coming on, whether that's in law or in business, because clearly those are that's something that anybody working in those employment areas and those industries is going to need to be able to deal with and to have the skills to utilize.
Yeah.
So I think taking some consideration on the basis of what you want to do, what excites you, and then what I would recommend is in sort of certainly looking into a bit more depth about what's within those programs. It's always a bit of a challenge, I think, for this university and all to give postgraduate programs a title, and a lot of them have a lot of content within them that can sound similar but may lead you slightly in one direction as opposed to another. So taking a bit of time to look in, do some research into what those postgraduate offers have got.
Yeah, I mean, you're talking about helping with employability and stuff.
Yeah.
Like this, I think one of the things that I really liked is how much this university does focus on that. Because I mean, it's all good to have the knowledge of your degree, but going out in the real world, you need to have some other skills that not just writing down on a paper. It's a lot more than that, a lot more practical things that you need to take into consideration. And I feel like this university really does emphasize on that. And I've seen it in for an example, in my degree, there's the Graduate Stream in Psychology Award, which to get that award, you have to do a lot of stuff that have to do with the PDC. So it sort of makes you have to have volunteering experience, you have to have work experience, you have to have a mock interview with the PDC. Yeah. And the fact that we have all of these things available to students, I think it really does prepare you for the real world when you graduate, and I think that's really good because sometimes it can be quite daunting when you graduate. So
I mean, most of our programs, we were sort of famous for the sandwich degree from the 1960s. I mean, that work placement, the sandwich being the work placement year, well, that still exists to a considerable extent, but over 80% of our programs still have some kind of work-based experience. In the 2020s, that looks different depending on which industry you might work in, and that's very distinct about here. And that sort of combined with that support is very important, I think, in enabling people to get jobs.
So we know, we were talking just right now about the PDC. We know that there's quite a few things that we have for students when they graduate. We know that there's a PDC. If I'm not wrong, is it available for, I think, 3 years after you graduate?
Yeah, so the Professional Development Centre, in case anybody's listening who's not.
Of course.
So, I mean, this is sort of careers advice combined with professional support, and that's available for 3 years after you graduate, and obviously all the time that you're here. I mean, it is an extensive set of support options. Some of the things you mentioned while students are here, I think, from the sort of more obvious things around how to apply for jobs and CVs and so on, but more importantly, skills in interviews, but also directing, I think, most importantly, to the right kind of experience that will get you into the world of work that you want to be in. And I mean, as I say, I constantly feel this when I go elsewhere in the UK and in the world where I meet alum of Brunel, and they talk about both the support as in PDC and that linkage between that and their work experience as having been a key developer in their career. More recent graduates particularly sort of talk about making use of that after a couple of years, and particularly in those circumstances where you might try something for a year and think that is not for me, and that's quite a common moment where people come back and then reevaluate and seek advice and get support, which is absolutely what you need at that point when you're trying to reevaluate which direction you might go in.
Yeah, I mean, I've been to the PDC a lot and they're lovely there. So if there are students who do need help, they're there to help, and they've got like appointments, stuff that you can book online that you can do interviews and stuff with if that's what you feel like you want to do. So people who have graduated from Brunel, they also are eligible for a discount. Is that right? When they apply for postgraduate?
Yes, I think there's a discount. I don't know it off the top of my head, but if you come back for a postgraduate, a master's program, or other postgraduate there is,
Okay, great. Well, I just wanted to ask you, do you have anything that you would say to all the students graduating this year? A little message to all of them that are listening.
Yeah, a couple of things. Firstly, I mean, we're a little bit ahead of the graduation ceremonies, and the graduation ceremony is my favourite parts of the year, the first thing to say is, as you get to graduation, sometimes people say, oh, I'm not sure if I'm going to come to the graduation. Most people in Brunel do. It's a really important moment, and take the time in the moment to reflect and celebrate your achievement rather than thinking about the next thing. There's plenty of time to think about the next thing. They're very important sort of moments of marking the end of that phase of your life, that period of study. And, it's a huge achievement. Yeah. And with family and with others, really, really enjoy the graduation. And don't feel that you've got to kind of, be thinking about the next thing immediately. Yeah. The other thing is to, as I always say, in the ceremonies, but I think it is important to realise that it's not the end of your relationship with the university. And I mean, a lot of my job is, in fact, to keep in touch with our 160,000 plus alumni around the world. And that might sound nice for me, and it is great to hear about the success of people who've studied at Brunel. But the more significant thing is actually being part of that community through your career. And it is a tremendously powerful network. And keep in touch with your people you've studied with, people you subsequently meet, and forge your way into that community wherever you are in the world, whatever you're doing later in life. So don't see graduation as the moment where you sort of get out the door and that's it. It is an important moment, but once you're part of the community, you remain part of the community. Yeah. And people find, I hear stories all the time of people, Brunelians, who've met others who, of course, they didn't know them when they were studying here. They may be generationally apart, but have got tremendous benefit from being part of that community and connecting, whether that's advice or help or just support or conversation, all kinds of things through the Brunel network. And we are trying to, the university's role is to facilitate that community as well, because the university is about more than just the time you're here, basically.
Yeah, I think, obviously we're doing this episode about what to do about after graduation, but I do want to say to all the listeners, do just take the moment to enjoy the actual graduation itself. Absolutely. Don't stress about it on that day. That's a day to celebrate. But yeah, I think that's pretty much it. Obviously, if there are students who are listening that are graduating, there is the eVision task that you need to accept by the 19th of June, I think it is. So please do that so that you can attend and confirm that you're going. I think that's pretty much it. Thank you so much for coming on today. It was an absolute pleasure to speak to you. And follow us on Instagram, listen to us on Spotify and on YouTube. And if you have any suggestions or if you'd like to be a guest, please email us in the bio underneath the video. Thank you so much.